Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to the second channel video. If you ever go to Glasgow, Scotland, one of the things you'll inevitably hear about at some point will be of the statue which has a traffic cone on his head. As you can see, this is the Duke of Wellington and his new headgear does look delightful, and that's where most people leave it. It's funny, there's traffic cones on the head of this statue and people probably don't like it, but they keep on doing it anyway because that's funny, right? And if you dive into most articles on the subject, you'll get something that basically says this, but again, like, the whole reason this started is a bunch of locals had a wee swally or two after a night out at the dancing. You know, weird language aside, they decided to be funny to place a cone on the statue's head. Just like the birth of the deep fried Mars bar, the more of the story goes that one lone prank can turn into a rite of passage, and so if you dive into it more, you'll find out that the local council and the police don't like it and spend about £10,000 per year removing it. And it's one of these problems where putting a traffic cone on a statue's head is as easy as, you know, throwing it on there while drunk, whereas, for instance, taking it down, you need to actually use a ladder and so on and so forth. And so it's one of those things where it's way easier to do than it is to undo. And so, what do you know, it's always got a traffic cone on his head. And, yeah, I actually tried to dive into it for a more reputable article because this is a place that no doubt makes a lot of money from tourism. They're trying to get me to stay there based on this statue alone, which is a very weird concept. But, you know, people stay in places for weirder things. So what about, like, a real news article? And the simple thing that you can boil it down to is there's two factors as to why historic statues, by the way, it's in all sorts of cities around the world, Leamington Spa, Auckland, New Zealand, Oxford, UK, and Nottingham, UK. That's right, those are all cities around the world, technically. Anyway, so as you can see, it's two factors: alcohol and the prevalence of roadworks in some kinds of city centers. And so, why is there a statue, or why is there a traffic cone on the head? Because alcohol and the prevalence of, traffic works. And honestly, yeah, I mean, that does make sense that, like, yeah, it's a big place for alcohol. It's a big place, you know, the Duke of Wellington, is it? He's probably not the most loved of figures, and so why not throw a traffic cone on his head? In fact, by the way, just in case you're curious, just for fun, one of the cool things you can do with Google Maps is you can see all the previous Google Maps histories. You can see how this time it's not two traffic cones, it's one traffic cone. You can see how if we go back a little bit further, he's wearing like a little pink vest as well. If we go back another year, you can see that, like, oh, it's got a pigeon on there. That's actually kind of funny in my opinion. If we go back another 2 years, you can see how the horse has its own traffic cone, and just so on and so forth. You can see that it very much is a different statue every time, which to me is indication that it is being removed and put back on. Oh look, the horse has a little traffic cone on too. And that's hilarious to me that basically as far back as you can go, there is a traffic cone on the head of the statue. And yeah, it's almost like a dive into the history city itself as to how this changes. Oh, this is the one time we can see it without a traffic cone. This is what it looked like in September 2010 before very quickly being brought back to its full glory with a nice blue traffic cone. I haven't even seen a blue traffic cone. That is really impressive. Anyway, so long story short, I feel like, you know, what this is it's one of those things where it goes off and on and on. But the thing that makes me suspicious is if you look behind it, it's in front of the Gallery of Modern Art. In fact, more suspicious than just being in front of the Gallery of Modern Art, if you look in the most recent picture, you can see how they actually have a traffic cone lying around right there. And, you know, if you're a modern art gallery, you know, you need to get some business going in, but how are people going to find out about you about walking past? And this isn't a very heavily, I mean, actually it probably is, but it doesn't look like the heaviest of thoroughfares, although there's a ton of people here. It is on Queen Street, don't get me wrong. I see that some people would go past, but why not make some form of point of interest in front of you? Except, darn, we can't do that because there's this, what is it, grade A listed, statue right here. You can't change the statue and make it more modern arty. But what you can do is you could throw a traffic cone on there, and if no one saw you doing so, maybe you'd be able to get away with throwing it on again if it got removed. Maybe you could do this infinitely, and as long as it wasn't you who was proven to do it, or maybe even better, maybe if you just left some traffic cones lying around and let other people do the same thing, maybe you could create an accidental tourist attraction, one so big that apparently it's used to sell, tickets to a place, and then in the background of all of those photos of it, what do you know? The lure of modern art is in the picture. This is my deep level conspiracy theory about this statue, and it's only possible to prove, I don't know what I just did right there, it's only possible to prove because of this Google Maps going back in time thing. It is a very nice building, don't get me wrong, by the way. I want to use this as an opportunity to say that, you know what, statues with traffic cones on their head, I feel like I've heard of a lot of cities where they're like, yeah, this is our unique thing, but something else I wanted to show off is that this Google Maps going back in time feature is so incredibly cool in my opinion, because 2008 wasn't that long ago. Although actually I'd be 13, so it was literally half my life ago. You can see the changes about basically anywhere between then and now. Here is the Glasgow Solicitors Property Centre next to a Pizza Express and a Coral, and then we skip forward to the present day, and it's a Virgin Money next to a, I think it's nothing now, and a Coral. Actually, no, that's a pretty bad example, huh? You know, Glasgow doesn't change a lot in 12 years. But if we go back in time 12 years, you can see how things change quite a bit. By the way, here's more proof for my weird little argument. Here are two horses on statue, or statues on horses. Again, they're in the same area. If it was just drunk people coming by and coincidentally picking up a traffic cone and putting it somewhere, then maybe you'd expect that of these four statues, you know, maybe you'd expect some traffic cones. And actually, you know what's funny? One's on the base of that one, but as you can see, none of the other ones have traffic cones on their head, which again, dives into my conspiracy theory more. Speaking of conspiracy theories, going back in time is a really cool way to see, you know, like all sorts of things. And it's crazy that you can literally see cities, like, you can see this sometimes in your own life, like, wow, it's crazy how different this looks before and after the thing. But you can see this infinitely on Google Maps. Here is Glasgow, I think it's called Glasgow Queen Street. It's one of the major stations in Glasgow. And as you can see, back in 2008, it had a little, what is that called? It had a Weatherspoons, and then I'm assuming this is a hotel, like it's linked to that, or maybe to that. I don't know what's going on here, but it looks like it's some form of apartment or hotel building. But then they decided, let's make a nice station, and they did this. Yeah, doesn't that look good? Isn't that a better, oh god, what did I just do? Isn't that a better use of the space? I think, you know, Google Maps' going back in time function is so incredibly fascinating, especially in cities that have been visited a whole ton, because yeah, things change a lot. Isn't it cool? Look at that. Look how nice the train station looks now as opposed to the past. It's that fun reminder that we're always moving into a more... the future is always changing, and in the vast majority of times it's better. It's a statement I make a lot, but like, Google Maps can prove this. Here's what this looked like in 2008. This is kind of boring, huh? Here's what it looks like in 2019. Is this better or worse, having a giant ad on the outside of this building? It must suck if you... I guess people don't live there, probably. But if you do live there, imagine like, yep. So, my building is now an advertisement for Love. Is that Love? That's not a good name for a movie. Oh no, Love, Lost, Love. Whatever, it's a name for a dating app and or location and or movie and or whatever it is. And so yeah, long story short, it's super interesting to look back and be like, whoa, things do change. With the exception being listed buildings. I think it's very interesting how super old, also wow, look how old that bus looks over there. I think it's interesting that like everything in a city will change besides things that we specifically put a lot of effort into not changing, and that's why, you know, like look right here in 2008 compared to, man, it's exactly the same again, just slightly nicer. Anyway, but if you look around, you can see that like, oh yeah, the one thing that can't change is listed structures. So even though everything around this statue can change, even though you know, there's a bruschetto and a Costa, whereas 11 years ago there was a Costa and a MYO, whatever that is. Man, I'm surprised by how many things have lasted 10 years in Glasgow City Centre. Certain things cannot change, and I really do think that is what this statue is almost like a semi-protest against. You can't officially change it, you can't knock it down, you can't make it more fun or quirky or a good advertisement for your business, unless maybe you go outside the rules. It's very easy to maybe, you know, like, rules only work as long as everyone kind of believes the rules work, and that's fascinating to me by myself. But you know what else is fascinating to me? I was thinking, because, you know, this whole going back in time and seeing, like, how places used to look, you can pick a random point in a map, and as long as it's somewhere people live, it'll probably have the same point. Let's go to Dublin, Ireland. You know what? Something about the population and increasing by a factor of 2 every year. If we go to... you know, what's the name of the place? I think it's Sean's Bar. So we go to Sean's Bar, it's not in Dublin, it's in Westmeath, as it turns out. So this is a funny example, actually, because this is a place not many people live. It's not going to prove my point, but I wanted to use this because it's a great example of like, okay, here's what it looked like in 2019, and here's what it looked like in 2009. Actually, this is, see, even a small village on the, I'm assuming the west coast of Ireland. Let's go find out where this is, actually. Even a small village that's all the way out in, okay, this is not useful at all. Even a small village all the way out in the middle of Ireland. That's even more confusing. I didn't know anything existed in the middle of Ireland. Anyway, so even a small village in the middle of Ireland where, you know, population is often decreasing at a pretty fast rate, you can see that, like, oh yeah, look at the village in 2019 and look at it all the way back in 2009, and things do change. Like, the logo for this place got way nicer. I mean, look at it then. This is a sad square box. What are you doing there? Whereas now they've got a Guinness clock, as you can see. It's Guinness time, which is, you know, I think that's a funny way to advertise Guinness, I guess. If you look around anything, you can see that there's constantly changes happening. Look how terrible this looks then versus, ooh, now it's a little sign about Mark Begg, the innkeeper entrepreneur. By the way, just as a fun fact, this. You might have read it there earlier, but Sean's Bar is actually the oldest business. This place right here is Ireland's oldest pub. In fact, it's so old that if we go back to 2009, it still has the same sign, although I think it changed color from red to blue. Wait, well, the doorway is red here, but in this one, the doorway is green. I wonder, whatever. So, as you can see, this is Ireland's oldest pub. And it's actually one of the oldest, it might be the oldest pub in the world, one of the oldest businesses in the world, because if you dive into this, which is apparently, according to businessfinancing.co.uk, the oldest company in every single country, if you dive into this particular map right here, you'll see that, like, oh yeah, there is a surprisingly few number, you know, again, people can live for 100 years, and so you might think that, like, well, businesses can live, like, near infinitely because they can pass from person to person, but businesses often don't. Again, if you look at a, like an example of, like, I don't know, what's the oldest business in, I know what's the oldest business in South Sudan? The Ivory Bank from 1994. It's like, man, that is really recently. The oldest business in Rwanda is the National Post Office from 1922. Again, less than 100 years ago at time of recording. This video, fewer than 100 years ago, perhaps we could say. But, you know, it's very interesting to look into and be like, oh yeah, when you dive into Europe, they have, because of this passing down from person to person, things can last a lot longer. There's a salt mine in, what is that, in Poland that has been around since 1248. There's the mint in Slovakia has been around since 1328. There's a bar, and in fact, if you look at most of these old businesses in Europe, it's like bar, or it's a public bank, or it's the post service. It's like one of those three things. Bank of Scotland, 1695. Royal Mint in England, 886. Sean's Bar, Ireland, wow, we confirmed it, 900. It's been around for 1100 years. Because again, like, over time, people's needs change. That's why, that is the reason why, for example, you know, this Shane's Hairdressing, it's probably the same now, isn't it? Because it's a small village. Is still Shane's Is that Shine's Hairdressing now? Maybe it was always Shine's Hairdressing. That's why this bookshop, you know, was actually previously a bookseller. You know, a village is the worst place to prove this because villages tend to move a lot slower. You know, let's just pick a random point in a random city. Where's a city that you've heard of? Have you heard of Berlin? Have you heard of Copenhagen? You might have heard of Copenhagen. So here is Copenhagen, right? I'm gonna pick a random street somewhere around here that I've never seen. Boom, there we go. Actually, this is a lie. I've seen this in real life, funnily enough. But you know, so as you can see, this is Star Shoes. But if we go back in time to 2009, it's a Hemtex, which I don't know what that is. You know, should have picked an English speaker. I mean, there's a lot of English here, but it's not primarily in English. Wildcat Piercing did not, oh, no, it expanded, actually. You know, good job, Wildcat Piercing. But the McDonald's, on the other hand, people need McDonald's less now than they did in 2009. So now it's a Vapiano, which is like Europe's weirdest fast food Italian chain. I don't entirely understand it. The souvenir store has only, actually, has it been around? Yeah, the souvenir store is new. It used to be a Rene. There used to be fewer tourists. Now there are more tourists. So my point is, needs change, with the exception being we still need money in some form or another. We still need beer because we need to drown our problems away. And we still need our post delivered. And I'd say the post thing is actually one of those, like, things that's about to fade out, right? Like, I think national post services have existed for so long solely on this idea that they're like mandated by government and that like we need a way to contact people, slowly that will fade. And that, again, even something as old as getting mail delivered might slowly fade out as a need and go into like, well, that's a quirky thing that some people might want. It's actually weird when you think about it, that like alcohol being a thing that is so popular that like oldest business in the Czech Republic, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, Luxembourg, as well as Lithuania, Latvia, and Belarus. Funnily enough, not Russia. In Russia, it's the watch factory. Anyway, my long story short with this whole point here is that lots of businesses can last very long if they can continuously serve people's needs. And people's needs do change over time, something that isn't reflected when we try to preserve the present in a box, which some people try to do. By the way, just in case you're curious, the oldest company in the world, Kongo Gumi, is in Japan. It was founded in 578 AD, and it was a construction company. And you know, that's a happy story that isn't going anywhere bad, I assure you. Oh, what's that? Did they go under in 2016? It's actually really debated as to whether they do still exist, because Shigemitsu Kongo actually made this company, and it kept surviving all those years, passing through his family, until 2016 when it sold, if I'm not mistaken, to a larger conglomerate. And so, like, because again, they couldn't survive because they had too much debt, blah, 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 blah. So, you know, I don't know if I trust this website, because it's somewhere that's trying to sell you gold and silver, and their whole point is like, oh yeah, ignore all the things they did well, it's all about debt. And it's like, well, you know, debt is bad, but maybe when you're making this giant point right here, maybe not that smart of a thing. So we'll ignore this article for now, but the point is that it is generally accepted that they probably went under because they don't exist in their original form as a family business. Now they're owned by a giant conglomerate. And so, therefore, the oldest business in the world, because the oldest in the world was 578, but you know, now it might be what, the Royal Mint in England? No, what it is the second oldest business is also in Japan. If you look up Nishiyama Onsen Kyuku, whatever. It was founded in 705, 1,316 years ago, and it's a hotel. It's the longest lasting hotel, provably, and probably the longest lasting business in the world. In fact, it was founded by Fujiwara Mahito, the son of a well-known aide who served the 38th Emperor of Japan, and he founded the hotel in 705, and it's had 52 generations of the same family operating that business. In fact, if you look at pretty much all the oldest companies in Japan, the thing they have different that isn't found elsewhere in the world on this map is that it's a family to a family to a family. You know, the Bogotvar access mine in Kazakhstan from 1913 probably isn't going to be passed from family to family for 1,000 years. Nor, for example, is the let's pick a fun example. Nor is it going to be the Mount Gay rum. Actually, that's probably a bad example. But there's a lot of old businesses that are just like, yeah, you follow them as long as it's passionate. So how is it humanly possible that a hotel, how a hotel lasts 52 generations? Because there's a strong culture of family to family, whatnot, in Japan. A family can last a lot longer than a business, and that's why, despite all the changing rules and systems in the world, there are certain families who manage to still hold power. There's that fun fact. I wish I'd sourced it before this, but you're gonna have to trust me on this. That it's something insane like if you go back to the Norman invasion of England, you know, when the French invaded and was the last time the UK basically changed hands. People with Norman names still have a wealth that is 37% higher than people without Norman names, because being part of that in-group at that time of power has an effect that can last this 1,000 years later, you know? Speaking of things that can last for 1,000 years, I wanted to actually dive into something interesting here, because although you just hear that like family lasts longer than business, and so that's the key point, have a family, don't have a business. Actually, you want to know something quirky? The real reason that families can last for 52 generations is because if someone doesn't want to do it, again, if you look at, here's a fun fact for you. America and Japan have the highest adoptions rates in the world, and in the US, children are most adoptions. In Japan, only 2% of adoptions are children. The other 98% are males around 25 to 30. That's right, most Japanese adoptions are males 25 to 30, which is the time you might be most down to run a business, because yeah, fun fact, It's actually just this idea of like, well, the family business needs to continue, so we'll just adopt someone into the family to run it. And I think that is a very interesting, you know, again, like, my first instinct was, well, this is a lie then, right? This isn't really the oldest business in the world. They just keep on adopting someone to say, you know, it's not actually a family business. But what if that's actually how this works? Yeah, like, if you, you know, if you have a family business and your children don't want it or they intend to sell it, you know, why don't you find someone, and rather than just finding like a manager who can run it for 10 years and then they have to go do other things, adopt them into your family, you know? Maybe we should blur the lines between family and business, or maybe that's a terrible idea, I don't know, but I really do think it's interesting, and so if you would like to be my son, and in 20 years when I'm not, you know, interesting enough to talk about the equestrian statues of the Duke of Wellington. By the way, I looked into it for this video because I forgot the name of it, and I kept finding these two statues in London. Why is this guy so important he gets two statues? And even weirder, why are both statues rated perfectly 4.4 stars? That's not how statues should, like, if they're, you know, they're just statues of you know, first of all, why 4.4? Like, some people are like, you know what, this isn't a very good statue. A 3-star review, it's, like, what, how can you give it a 3-star? It's a statue. It's either, it's, like, I don't fully understand that. But then even more importantly, if they're in entirely different areas, it's kind of weird they're rated the same. If we search across London's KFCs, or actually McDonald's is a famously consistent chain, right? It's pretty much the same experience from one to the other. You'll notice they have hugely different reviews. Some of that can be down to service or whatever, I'm sure. Different employees that care more or less. But a lot of it's down to, like, how much it meets the needs of the locals versus what their expectations are. And so you'll see that, like, McDonald's in St. Paul's is a 4.1. People know what they're getting. Whereas if you go to Deptford, or you go to Bethnal Green, or heaven forbid, Hackney, and you go to McDonald's, you're like, I don't get it. This isn't the best thing in the world. I wonder if that's actually true, or if it really is entirely down to staffing. Like 3.2 versus 4.1, there's a big difference. If we go of any chain, I think Subway's always the one that famously is the worst. Like, there's nothing amazing a Subway employee can do. It's so mandated by corporate, and yet the Subway in Canary Wharf, the financial center, 3.7. Subway in Greenwich, 3.1. Subway in, is that Deptford? I'm not sure where this is, honestly. The Subway in wherever this is, Whitechapel area, Shadwell, a 3.0 star. Why are they all rated so differently? Maybe it proves a point that our ratings are all arbitrary, or maybe what it really says is that this whole video is arbitrary, and you know what? If you would like to run this video in the future, hit me up, and then maybe I'll adopt you as an adult. Oh, I have one more thing I want to share. There's a good chance I have to cut this from the video later for copyright claim reasons. So, just in case it ends here, thank you for watching the video. Second channel, don't care, goodbye. But, if you're watching now, then we haven't had to cut this out for copyright reasons. So, I love this whole diving back into diving back in time via a city. Like, I look at, basically anywhere in London has this, like, really cool transformation. Like, here is King's Cross, St. Pancras. Let's go there. These are two of the bigger railway stations in the UK. If we go back, like, I don't know, 2008, look how, like, oh, that's very different, isn't it? Everything about this is changed very slightly. It's cool. One of the cool things about living in such a big city is the rate of change and the rate at which things are, in my honest opinion, getting better. Wow, look, there's, like, shops outside of it, and then it's kind of ugly, right? And then, ooh, look at this grand open area. People like those nowadays, so we'll go to it until eventually in 12 years, people like going back to this more, and we'll build a newsstand again. I hope we don't build newsstands again. Newsstands are the most confusing thing to me, but, you know, a lot of things confuse me, and that's fine. Anyway, so as you can see, on this side, it's like, oh, actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was a Wendy's here at one point. I've always heard about it, but I've never been able to confirm with my own eyes. Well, I guess I won't be able to confirm right now. Look at this, for instance. This is a, okay, it's a nothing right now. And what is it in the present? It's a Five Guys. Life is always improving, and there's my point. But yeah, London is a cool city to see going back in time. And one of the cool things that you can actually see about it is this. The EastEnders. So EastEnders, by the way, even though I never watched the show, I can recognize the theme tune. And, you know, whatever, you get the point. Anyway, so apparently it's more recognizable than God Save the Queen. But the crazy thing about the EastEnders opening is that it plays London like from an aerial camera, like kind of panning circwards. And so this is it only started in like 1985 or something. Like what is that, 35 years ago? Surprisingly recently. However, if you look at the thing right here, you can see that, like, oh yeah, so this is 1985 London. This is the modern one. They actually have updated it. I don't know how often they update it, like every 5 years or something. And you can see it's the exact same pan. It actually doesn't look like it's the same pan because of how developed it is, at least to me. But if you look at where it ends up, you can see that, like, here is the same thing now. Here is the thing then. There is literally, where things like the O2 Arena are, you know, this giant thing here, there is literally black on the map. I don't know if that's clouds or if it literally was that industrial an area. But like, yeah, look at this right here. Look at how this is just all docks right now in 1985. Now it is the financial capital, maybe the second financial capital of the UK. It's insanity how fast all of this moved. Look at this right here, how there's like a ton of water here and everywhere. And now it's like, oh yeah, now this is, you know, London's like 5th busiest airport. It's, long story short, it's crazy how even this TV show, which is not even trying to prove a point about going through time, it's just, here is a view of London, the East End of London, perhaps we could say, and even that's changing. I don't know what this video was. I hope you all enjoyed it anyway, though. I'm gonna go have a bagel, maybe put some pork in that bagel, or some salmon. You know, it'll be a big salmon bagel, it will be. But have a good day, unless your name ends with an A. Goodbye.